What's up everybody, I'm Alessandro and welcome to The Standard Race. Today, finally, I'm gonna review the Casio G-Shock GW-7900. I've been unboxing this baby like 2 or 3 months ago, so you guys have been patient enough. And so today is the time. But before that, of course, well, customary wristwatch check, I'm wearing my Seiko SNK 393. And this is pretty much the opposite of the Casio GW-7900. This one is a cracking 37mm watch that is very subdued, can be your only everyday watch. I think, by the way, this is a great entry-level first watch for a beginner if you want to get a automatic watch and not break the bank. Very nice looking. I like the details around the hour indices. You know, these Seiko 5 watches are crazy value for money and this one is no exception. But on to today's subject, the Casio G-Shock GW-7900. So a little backstory about that G-Shock GW-7900 and why I got it. So my very first G-Shock, actually I got it just a few months ago, and that is the GWM-5610. You know, for a reason. This one is lightweight, and of course, being a smaller G-Shock, it fits smaller wrists. And I can't fold the 5610 because when you look at this watch from this angle, it is perfect. But I was lacking some kind of presence, some kind of ruggedness from what I see is actually what makes G-Shock great. And so I was shopping around to find a G-Shock that was at the same time big, but I could still pull off on my small wrist. And I think the GW-7900 is exactly that. It's a bigger piece. We're gonna see the dimensions just in a few seconds, but it's a bigger piece, yet it still managed to work on a small wrist. At least I think so. But I just happen to prefer the more rugged and more intricate look from the GW-7900 because you have that tag graph, you have that moon face. For me, it is more, more enjoyable. And another thing that I really like about it is the fact that you can have both time zones, actually, so 2 time zones, your local time zone and your home time zone at the same time on the home screen. But enough talking, let's jump right into it. And here it is in all its glory. Of course, this being a thicker, bigger G-Shock. Let's check the dimensions. It has a case of 50mm, and this is by taking into consideration these little flaps right here. You can see on this part as well, right there. It has a thickness of 16mm, and when you take the screws into consideration, it's even bigger at 17.4. What appears to be the actual case size to your eye will be 46.6mm. When it comes to lug distance, it's like more this distance, which is 52mm. The size of the strap where it meets the case is 27.5mm, and it tapers down to 20mm. So by all standards, this is a big watch, but when you actually measure the dial and what appears to be kind of the chapter ring, you get a measurement of 34mm, and this is why I think it is still working on a smaller wrist. So this is your typical 5-button layout when it comes to G-Shock. So you have the mode button right here, the adjust button up there, the split and reset function right here, and the start stop right here. The 5th button is the backlight. So not your typical LED that you find in entry-level Casios, but rather that fully illuminated screen right there. And as you see, I set the alarm to go off every hour, and you can see that my main light is still on, and you can see the difference. So of course you will be able to see this in the night, and to prove it, well, your dial will look like this in a pitch dark night, and as soon as you press the light button, no problem, you can read the time, no problem whatsoever. The thing that I really like about the home screen is that you have the day and the date, of course, but you can switch that to your local time zone if you happen to travel a lot. So here you can see that I have my local time zone set to Los Angeles, while this is the time at home, namely Brussels, Belgium. Very nice function right here. I really like it a lot. But before exploring the mode, let's see just how many things you can adjust on this watch right here. So here you will be able to change your time zone. So between Madrid, Paris, Rome, Berlin, this kind of things. Of course, I am closest to Paris, so this is why it is on Paris. Then you have the daylight saving time. It is set on auto, and I just released a video a few days ago talking about DST that will pretty much end in Europe in 2 years' time. This watch actually switched the DST off based on the date, which I think is pretty cool. So this is what auto will do for you. Continuing, well, you have the choice between your 12 and 24-hour time. Well, this is how I prefer my time to look like. Here you can obviously change the time and date if you cannot sync it with the atomic clock radio control towers that will send the signal to the watch. Here you can actually remove the beep when you press those buttons. I do prefer them to actually make the beep, and you will understand why. Then you can change just how much time the backlight works, between 3 seconds and 1.5 seconds. Of course, I prefer it to be 3, just to enjoy the watch that much more. This is the power save function, and so when you put the watch away and that the light dims and you do not wear it for a few hours, well, it will pretty much turn the display down to save power, of course, and then back to your home screen. So if you look at the RC indicator right here, you can see that it is off. So nothing is showing, and this is because I wanted to show you how to actually make the watch sync manually. You just have to press and hold this button, and there you go, it will actually sync to the time. Now it says L1 because this is the weaker signal that this watch can get. I will put it near a window to sync it. So now the watch synced just a few seconds ago, and you can see here get and then the date and the time when it syncs. If you want to get back to the home screen, just push the stop button right there, and there you have it. One of the last functions that you have right here is if you press and hold this one, you will be able to enable auto illumination by just rocking your watch toward your face. Let me show you that. So when you're in a dark environment and you tilt the watch, then it lights up automatically, which I think is pretty cool, but I had to turn it off for a simple reason. When I was wearing this watch during the night, well, it would light up all the time, and so this would drain the battery going from high right there to medium, which for some reason I didn't want, and I really didn't need that time to be all the time visible with that display always lit up. So I actually prefer to take this particular feature and turn it off. Now, why did I keep the beeps enabled on the watch? Well, for a simple reason. When you change mode, you have a beep telling you that you actually pressed a button, but when you come back to the home screen, you have a different beep. Listen to this. See, it's a different one, so you don't have to look at your watch when you're using it for another function. You just can press it and wait for it to have the right sound. And you know that you're back on the home screen right there. And talking about beeps, well, the beeps on the GW-7900 are louder than on the GW-5610. I don't know if it's because they actually can put some other kind of device in there that can pretty much be louder, but it is definitely louder. I'm not even sure that you can hear the one from the GW-5610. So this dial, there's a lot going on, but I really like it, and this is why I got this one. Of course, out of the box, you can see that huge G-Shock and shock resist right there. I think the light button really stands out as well, and those screws, of course. And you have those typical indications on your G-Shock with pretty much everything that those buttons do, which is always helpful because you don't have always your manual lying around. So as you guys have seen, this is a radio control watch, so it will set itself every night at 3 AM, and at the same time it's a solar powered watch, so you can see right there the solar panels, which is very cool as well. Just put it in the light and it doesn't have to be in the sunlight all the time, and it will charge and always stay on. And this is why when I'm dressed casually, I take this one because it's always on time and I don't have to set it. It is so handy. So I don't know if you can spot it, but the actual LCD inscription, so the date and the time and all these kind of things, are crisper on the GW-7900 compared to the GW-5610. So you may not spot it when you look at one watch and then the other one, but when you put them side by side, this is very visible right there. This is one of the things that I like about this watch, is just how crisp the dial is, and I actually take the positive dial because I think the negative dial looks very rugged and very cool, but it is very hard to read, so I did prefer to get this one. Of course, you get the moon phase right here and the tide graph right there, which really doesn't serve any purpose for me, but I think it gives this watch a very cool looking dial, so this is why I got it. So of course, when it comes to accuracy, no problem with this watch whatsoever. At most, you will have like half a second difference at the end of the day, but because it will sync itself at the end of the night, no problem there. If you want to have a easy way to put it at the window for it to sing, you just put your strap in the keeper right there, and then you'll be able to put it on the table just like this. Super easy. You put it in the sun so it charges and it sets itself during the night. Super easy. When it comes to the case, of course, nothing new right here. This is a huge case, and compared to the GWM-5610, let's put them one on top of the other, there is no arguing that the GW-7900 is big. That's a big G-Shock, that's a big thing on your wrist. But I do like the added presence and actually the look of this watch. So if wearing something a little bit bigger is okay with you, I think you might be very pleased with this one. So the first function is the tide graph, when you push the mode button, and you can switch the time just to see where is going to be the tide compared to the actual location at which you put your tide. You have to go in the manual and see how to do that. And when you push the adjust button, you can have also the number of days elapsed. So for example, here I'm setting it to the 31st of October, and the actual moon phase is 22.3 days. So for example, if I go back, let's say 4 days, it's 18.3, obviously. When you push and hold this button right here in the moon and tide function, you can actually change at what time you have the highest tide depending on the location you want to know and the specific date that you have chosen before. So for example, back on today, you go on a website and you check the time, the tide actually, of the location you want to set for your particular watch. You press and hold right here. And then, for example, well, you say that it's gonna be, let's say 7:05 for me, and it's gonna be okay. So the graph will always show the right tide for this particular location. You just have to check the time at which the tide is highest on the location you want to set. Also, when you're in this mode and you press the mode button, then you can change the orientation of the moon phase. Obviously, this will depend on the hemisphere that you're in. If you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, you can change that. In my case, well, the setting was right. And you're back to your tide and move phase function right there that you can switch between just by pressing this button right there. On to the next function, and that is the world timer function. As you can see now, I have the time set on Sydney. So 31st of October, and it's 11 p.m. right there. You can change the time zone by pushing these buttons. So this is going backwards and this is going forward. So if I want to go and check Los Angeles, I go to LAX, and this is the time zone of Los Angeles. You can actually go back to UTC by pressing those two buttons at the same time. And I will go back to Paris, which is the closest city to my place, and the actual time. By pushing this button, you can actually enable or disable DST for this particular time zone. Unfortunately, you cannot switch between the home and the local time zone by pushing these two buttons like you can on some G-Steel models and some analog Casio G-Shocks, but there you have it, pretty handy. Nonetheless, when you go back to the home screen, it's always possible to have both at the same time, so not really a problem right there. But this wouldn't make much sense, because this is actually a great way to get the time zone from another place on Earth, and not especially home, because, well, home, I have it on the home screen. So at the same time, I want to have on the home screen the time of the part of the world where I have the most viewers, and that happens to be Los Angeles and California. So let me go back to California and put this baby to the time of you viewers from California. And there you have it. I know it is 6:22 in the morning, and let me go back to my home screen where I can switch between the dates and my other time zone. On to the next functions, and these are first and foremost the alarm. You have 4 of them. Then you have, so these are daily alarms that will stop after you snooze them. Actually, a snooze alarm that will reset every day. And then you have that signal that is the beep that you will hear at every hour. I take it on because I think it's a cool feature, a useful one for me, just to keep track of time. Next function, of course, is the stopwatch. Nothing special right here. This is the typical stopwatch you can find on most G-Shock. So you start the time right here and you can stop it or pause it if you like. Start again, then you can actually get the first lap timing. It is still running in the background, then you can stop it and check the second lap timing. And then again, you can start it, stop it, and when it's stopped, you can reset it with that button. Next function, we have the timer. So this one is pretty straightforward as well. You push and hold this button right here and you will be able to change the time. So let's go to 4 minutes, let's say. Okay, let's say this is the timer that I want. Back to it and then again start, and it will begin to count down, and when it's done, of course, it will beep. You can stop and reset it and back to the home screen. I know a few of owners of this watch reported that these screws can fall and you will just lose them. I just happen not to have that problem, but I didn't have this watch enough for this problem to show maybe, so that might happen in the future. I just don't know. I have this watch for maybe 2 to 3 months, so that might happen. Another detail is if you look at the buttons, they have a certain texture, but when you look at the start stop button, this one is different. You have a different texture and it's bigger. So this makes it grabbing those buttons really easy, which is not the case on this GW-M5610, because this one has really small metal buttons that are not super easy to operate with your fingers. This one, no problem whatsoever, super easy to operate in whichever condition. Onto the resin band, and this is kind of comfortable. You know, when I got it, it was kind of stiff, but with time, it became a lot more flexible, and that was even truer on hot days because the heat of the sun would actually make this even more flexible. So now it is not as stiff as it was before. Of course, again, it's a long band, not great for a small wrist, but you can still cut it to size and file it so that it looks pretty much okay. Now on the buckle, well, nothing special going on for the buckle. It's plain. It's a little bit boring to be totally honest, but you know, this is probably not the thing that you're gonna look onto the watch, like not whatsoever, never ever. So there you have it. Pretty satisfied with the band. Of course, it's a large one, but pretty comfortable, even if, of course, this is a bulkier piece. So let's talk about the back of the watch, because there are two things going on. First and foremost, this is a 200 meters water resistant watch, so you can dive with this one, no problem. And then you have those flaps right here, which really helps with comfort. And that is true specifically for smaller wrists where, you know, this resin band cannot reach your wrists because, you know, there's kind of a gap right there, but these wings really help with making the watch close to your wrist. So that's a good thing right here. You do not have this kind of feature, I would say, on the GW-5610. Now, another thing to take into consideration is the strap size. So the strap on the GW-7900 is big, and that is one of the bad things for a small wrist. Of course, you will be able to wear this on top of a diving suit or pretty much anything you will want to wear. It's no problem, but because it is longer, you can see not that much, but this sticks out. You will see that as soon as I will put this watch on my wrist. Nonetheless, I think it's a very cool looking, very tough looking watch. I really like it, even if it's bulky and I cannot put it any time I want, because, you know, it's not going to slide under a cuff or under a jacket. This will not work. Obviously, this is not for business environments or a dressier occasion, that's for sure. I still do love it a lot. I think it's a cracking looking watch. So let's put it on my wrist, and of course it's going to be something totally different from this SNK 393 from Seiko. It's going to be kind of a bulkier option right here, but again, if you're like bigger watches, and specifically this one because it's a G-Shock, I think it's a cool option. Now, for my 6-inch wrist, I can put this strap on the second hole, but it's gonna be really, really tight. So most of the time I put it on the third hole, because after wearing this one for just like 10 to 20 minutes, well, you will sweat a little bit and it will stay put. So here is how it looks like on my 6-inch wrist. And you can already see what the problem is. Of course, it's a bigger piece, we know that, no problem, but I think the problem is this strap that is sticking out right there like a marshmallow roasting stick. I like when I take pictures of this watch to push this one down so that it doesn't show, but of course then you have this weird strap right there. So what do I have to do? I want to cut it to size right here so that it doesn't stick out when I look at the time like this. Now, as seen from the side, you can see it hugs my wrist pretty well for a watch that is this big. Again, I have a 6-inch wrist and it's pretty bulky, so of course you can feel that bulk, but it's not heavy. It just takes a lot of space. Now, if you don't like the look of it because you think that my wrist is too thin for this watch, and that might happen, well, there's a solution. Bracelets. So I talked about that in one of my videos that I called 5 ways to deal with small wrists. I'm gonna link it if you want to check it out, but basically it is just about putting some bracelets around your wrists, and this will actually hide the thinner part of your wrist and make the watch look a little bit smaller than it actually is, because you're tricking the eye that, you know, the watch is not so big because you cannot see the wrist really. So there you go. With the bracelet, of course, you can still see that's a big watch, but you know, there's a lot of hiding going on there, so it's kind of working. If you want to pull this one off, but you don't feel comfortable only wearing this watch, you just can put some bracelets. I don't care, most of the time I just don't wear them, but it's more a matter of look for me. But if you need them, well, that could be one option for you guys. And of course, as usual, a little wrist roll for you. And so here it is on my 6-inch wrist as seen from a distance. Of course, it's a bigger piece, there is no arguing with that, but you know, it's a tool watch, it's a rugged watch, and it still works for me. You know, these are meant to be a little bit bigger, a little bit tougher, and because the case and the bezel are so big, well, the dial is pretty small, so when you look at the proportion between the dial and the wrist, I think it's okay. Now you can see that strap sticking out. I really want to cut this strap to size so that it doesn't stick out like that, because I think this doesn't look great, but all in all, it's a very fun watch, very rugged watch, cool looking. I really like a lot, and I've been wearing this one quite a lot. If you've been following my What Are You Wearing series, you know that this one has been featured quite a few times. So you guys know that I like to rate my watches depending on 5 factors, so here we go. First and foremost, is it straightforward? You know, it's a G-Shock, so there are many things going on the dial, so I don't want to compare this with a dress watch. This makes no sense whatsoever. But for a G-Shock, is it straightforward? I think it kind of is. The layout is pretty well balanced for me, so I would give this one a 4 out of 5 for a G-Shock. Not possible to give it a 5 because there are so many things going on, but you know, pretty straightforward to me for a G-Shock. Does it stand out? Of course it does. I mean, I cannot give this piece anything else than 5 out of 5. This is a bulky piece, super thick as you saw, you know, you cannot miss it on my wrist. By the way, most people don't care and even don't notice, but I do care and I do notice. So there's a lot of presence there, so it does stand out. So this one, 5 out of 5. What about refinement and detail? You know, even in the realm of G-Shock, there are some refined and detailed G-Shock. This one being very rugged, all black case and strap. It's very hard to find actually something refined about it. Now, when you think of details, I think the overall appearance of the watch is pretty balanced. Nonetheless, there are many things going on. The details are the typical details that you can on a G-Shock, so there's a description so that you know which button does what. I just have to give this one a 3 out of 5. What about comfort? You know, this one is pretty big for a small wrist and at the same time it's pretty thick. So that means that it will have kind of a hard time sliding under a cuff from a thicker sweater. I'm not even talking about a shirt because I mean, there's a mismatch right there. In the winter, it's kind of a pain in the neck to wear this one because it's really hard to make it slide under some, you know, thinner jackets and specifically leather jackets. Not super comfortable, so it's still a G-Shock, so I know it's gonna be heavier, but I cannot give this one more than 3 out of 5. Not the best experience when it comes to comfort. But the thing is, the what the hell factor on this one is huge. I would love to give this one a 6 or a 7 out of 5. Really guys, this is just how much I like this piece. Of course, I can only give it a 5 out of 5, but when I want to wear a G-Shock, every single time I picked this one over this one. And so overall, this watch gets a 80% score when it comes to, is it a fit for my collection? Now the thing is, that score, I think, really doesn't depict how I feel about this watch. I like it so much, I would love to give this one a 90%. And I told you, the what the hell factor on this one is huge. And I think it's really important to understand that you do not have always to go small if you have a small wrist, and this particular watch is a good example of that. Maybe you do not like it because comfort is so important to you that you don't want to wear something that is so big and sometimes uncomfortable. And at the same time, you might not be, super comfortable wearing something bigger on your wrist, and that's okay. I totally understand that. But I have so much fun with this piece that I really do not care. And of course, as usual, you'll find a link in the description below if you want to get this cracking Casio G-Shock GW-7900 for yourself. That would help the channel a lot. Guys, what do you think of this Casio G-Shock GW-7900? Do you have one? And if that's the case, what's your wrist size? If you don't, how do you feel about wearing something a little bit bigger, specifically G-Shocks? I know a lot of you guys, like the GW-M5610, which is the go-to small G-Shock, but maybe you like something bigger. And I think that a bigger G-Shock is part of the fun, but please share with everybody in the comment section below what are your thoughts and opinions on this matter. Of course, if you like this video, well, please hit that like button. And if you want to stay tuned about lists, reviews, watches for small wrists, and watches in general, because that's what we like around here, well, subscribe to the channel and check that little bell icon so that you get notified as soon as I post a new video. And in the meantime, thank you so much for dropping by. Stay stylish and keep watching this one.